Welcome to another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Debra Rufini.
Greetings from England. This is Debra Rufini with another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show. Today it is my absolute pleasure to be speaking with the amazing Karen Lafferty, composer of the wonderful hymn Seek Ye First and director of Youth with a Mission Santa Fe. Karen, thank you so much for being on the show. So pleased to have you with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, yeah. It's morning here, and it's going to be a nice sunshiny day, and I'm ready for it.
Yay. Oh, that's good. It's funny, isn't it, that time gap? It always feels really strange. It's like I feel guilty that I'm sort of racing ahead in England.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, wonderful. Do you know, I wanted to, I'm so pleased that you've agreed to be on the show, because for so long I've absolutely adored Seek Ye First. It's been my go-to hymn. I remember as a little girl.
Well, believe it or not, it's been mine too.
Oh!
You know, it's just in that scripture has been just my signature scripture, and once I really started understanding what Jesus was saying to us with that, I thought, wow, if we just get this down, the rest of life will kind of come together here, I think.
Oh, wow. It's such a blessing. Talk about that a bit. How it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've been listening to this a lot lately with a lot of your other songs, which are also brilliant, absolutely amazing. But certainly with Seek Ye First, it's the smoothness of the tune also kind of accompanies or complements the lyrics. Very, very clever. Well, I'm assuming that's a musician's job. Anyway, I know nothing about music.
Well, yeah, you know, in a sense, it's one of the most simple songs I've ever written. I'm a music major, and it was like a first-year theory project. But, you know, that's what people can relate to. It's something simple that it helps. I think people could remember it so easily, and I think that's why it kind of went around the world so quickly, is that they would hear it, and they think, wow, I need to remember that, and they would sing it, and of course we had the little hallelujah part, and discant above it. But, you know, that came at a very key time in my life. Should I go ahead and kind of tell the story of it?
I'd love to hear that, yes.
Well, you know, I had gone through, I was raised in New Mexico.
Okay.
And it's kind of cowboy and Indian country, you know, and it's in a small town. And I had, just a really great childhood and all that. Mm. Although, I just finished my book called Seek Ye First, Karen Lafferty story. But I had some difficulties in my childhood, and that I had some, sexual abuse from a family member and all that. But, you know, God has been so faithful to heal all of that now, which people will read in my book. But, but still, nevertheless, it didn't really hold me back from, you know, things, my interest in music and in life. And so I ended up getting into entertaining, but I got a music education degree, too. I thought I was going to be a school teacher.
Oh, okay.
And I have taught a lot through the years, but I've never taught in public school. But I have a choir directing degree and a minor in oboe. I play wind instruments too. But during school, I was raised in a Christian home, and so I always believed in the Lord. But you know, as we get older, that's why Seek Ye First is so important, because it's got, Jesus has to be our first love.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be Seek Ye First. You know, not, you know, when you have time and when it's convenient and all of that. Yeah. But it's got to be our first focus, you know, to really follow after things of God. And I didn't understand that as much when I was younger. I was just excited about life. Got into music, got into bands and folk groups at that time. That was in the 60s. So that was all about folk music and everything. And during my years of entertaining, or going to school, I should say, I got into entertaining, and I found out I could make some pretty decent money at it. So after I graduated from university, I said, went on the road to just see if I could make it,
Yeah.
in the entertainment world. I was writing some songs and all that. So I ended up down in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was entertaining down there. And a friend of mine came down and visited me that I'd grown up with. And she'd gotten involved with a group called Campus Crusade for Christ.
Okay.
And tell you what, she really started learning what it is to walk in the Spirit, to walk daily with Christ instead of just a Sunday thing or, occasional thing. And so I was really challenged by her life. And by that time, my life was a little bit spiraling down,
Oh, wow.
And even though I believed in God, I didn't know how to, really just make him a reality in my life. And I just didn't know the power over sin and things like that. So, anyway, I really started praying and said, God, I just need to learn what it is to follow you. So it was after that then that I moved out to California to pursue my entertainment career. And by that time, I really wanted to be salt and light in the entertainment world. There was some famous people that were Christians like Pat Boone.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people remember some of these names. Of course, Johnny Cash, he was kind of a Christian, outwardly. And so there was a few others. So I just thought, I want to be salt and light in the entertainment world. And,
Wow.
the first people I ever led to the Lord was in a bar I was working in.
Oh, great.
I just started to kind of shining my light out there. And people would come and ask me about the Lord.
Wow.
And so now I prayed before I went to California, because at that time in 1971, it was just all about drugs, sex, and rock and roll, and Haight-Ashbury, and all of these hippie things. And I just said, God, are there like any Christians in California?
Yeah.
And I knew there must be. I thought, I just really need to find them, because I need to have some fellowship. So I went and stayed with my aunt and uncle who lived out there.
Yeah.
And I asked my cousins, I said, do you all go to church anywhere? They said, oh, yeah, we got saved at this place just this was in Costa Mesa, California. And they said, we got saved at this place called Calvary Chapel. And it was just down the road. It was just 5 minutes away from their house. So they took me there, and I was just so amazed. And just that what was going on there, all these hippies, that had turned Jesus freaks.
Wow.
And so I got involved with that. And I did get a good entertainment job. But nevertheless, and even though I was leading people to the Lord there, I was missing a lot, for one thing, that was happening in the evenings, because I was working evenings at church and things. And I just remember the very night that I felt called to the ministry. And it was after I just had a discussion with a guy that I knew had tried to commit suicide a couple of weeks before.
Oh, wow.
But he was just, persecuting me in a sense. He just said, you goody two-shoe Christians, and all that. And yet he was so lost. And I was so brokenhearted over him. And I was just talking to the Lord on my way home. And I said, Lord, I don't think I want to sing, I want to sing about your truth.
Yeah.
I don't want to sing Raindrops Keep Falling on my head and Mr. Bojangles, all of these popular songs. I want to sing about you and about your truth. And so that's the night I felt called to the ministry. Okay. So I went from a $500 a week, which was good in 1971, job to nothing.
Oh.
I called up my mom, and I said, Mom, I thought she'd be so excited. She was a Christian, led me to the Lord. Yeah. And I said, I just feel called to the ministry. And she said, so what does that mean? I said, well, I'm quitting my entertainment job, and I'm just going to be singing and at church and at coffee houses and just wherever I can. And, we're doing a lot of evangelism. I'm going to go out with everybody else, and we're going to just tell people and sing to people about Jesus. And
wow.
And I thought she'd be so excited. And she said, well, so are you on salary at the church now? And I said, well, no, they call it living by faith. And I said, and then a silence on the end of the phone. And she said, did you remember I'm the co-signer on your loan for your car?
Oh.
I said, yes, Mom. And I believe where God guides, God provides. And so I knew I couldn't, call home for money. And I just found the cheapest place I could find to live is about $90 a month. And I just, I knew every thrift store around. I just learned what it was to live very frugally. And I would get offerings, when I was seeing places, but it was pretty slim.
Was it? Yeah.
And so I got to the point where I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent. I didn't know how I was going to pay my $50 car payment. And I thought, I don't know what to do. Maybe I should find a day job of some sort. I was teaching music lessons, I should say. That was my only regular source of income, but I didn't have very many students. It wasn't much at all. And I went to church. I thought I've learned that when I have problems, I don't go and run and blame God, but I go to Him.
Wow, that's good.
So that's where I just went to a Bible study at church. And they were going through the book of Matthew, and they were in the Sermon on the Mount, and where Jesus started saying those words in Matthew 6, where He said, consider the lilies of the field and the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap, but God takes care of them. So how much more will He care for you? So seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. I thought, all these things. Okay, that means my rent, our payment, everything. And so I just went home, and my rent wasn't paid, but my joy was back. I just thought, God, I know that's the answer. I just got to live it. And so my guitar was right there, and I at first just plucked out that little melody on my guitar. And then I, sang it, and it worked. And so I put on a little cassette recorder, and then I started listening to it, and I kind of came up with that little hallelujah part above it. And the next week, on Monday nights, we had what they called youth night. Every night was youth night at Calvary Chapel, but it was a special one, and they would let those of us that had written some new songs, there was a lot of songs being written at that time, they would let us share them. So Pastor Chuck Smith, I asked him, I said, I got a new scripture song, can I share it tonight? And he said, sure. And so I did, and everybody remembered it immediately. And
I'll bet.
Pretty soon after that, we started figuring, hey, did you notice that Matthew 4:4, man shall not live by bread alone? That fits good with that, too. And then Matthew 7:7, and that was asking, it shall be given unto you, and seeking, you shall find. So we started putting other verses to it, all Bible verses. We didn't want to make up verses. We wanted Bible verses.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened. And then in we recorded it in 73, but in 1974, Maranatha Music, which was just a musician's fellowship at first, but we became a record company, and they decided to, we were all just in a fellowship meeting, said, there's a lot of songs that we have that are just kind of praise songs and worship songs. Why don't we put them all on one record?
Yeah.
It hadn't been done much before.
Okay.
And yeah, do you remember that? Well, I don't know. You're not old enough to remember some of that. But
well, I don't know.
So they decided, let's put them all on one record, and we put Seek Ye First on that first praise album that Maranatha put out, and that's how people got to know it.
Great. Oh, what a blessing.
So that's a long version, probably, of the story.
That's wonderful. I mean, no doubt over the years you've received a lot of feedback of how it's blessed people and transformed their lives, and have you...
I still get messages, on Facebook or somewhere else, from people, and it so blesses me each time because I just think, it's God's Word. I said, and I always say, if you find a good lyric writer, you can write a good song. Lyrics to me are the hardest part.
Oh.
And the words of Jesus you can't lose with, you know.
Yeah.
So I get very blessed when I hear that people, I still get messages from people that, you know, that song really helped them get through, and I'm so glad for that.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, it is. Like I say, it's such a blessing. Do you feel, Karen, that a lot of Christian artists say that they feel that God gives them? So I remember an interview with Annie Herring of Second Chapter of Acts, and she said about God. Do you feel the same, that it comes more from God than from as if God is giving you the gift?
Well, of course, that's what you pray for. And, you know, just this morning I was taking some time with the Lord, and I was just going through the Gospel of John again. And it was just so clear that, and, you know, even you get to the point about Nicodemus, when Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, you know, one of the rulers of the Jews, and what really came out to me, and all the things I was reading, was that it's all about walking and moving in His Spirit, listening to God's Spirit. And I think as songwriters, you know, it says the rain falls and the sun shines on the just and the unjust alike. So He's blessed everybody with creativity. And so there's a lot of good songwriters out there, but there's something special, just like you said, Annie said, that there's something special about just really feeling the unction of God, from God, that, wow, I need to write about this subject, or you know, something from this scripture, because it's truth. And I think, I believe there are, you know, skills that we develop in songwriting. Sometimes in songwriting classes, people say, well, God gave me this song, and you listen to it and you think, it's not a great song. And then we say, well, maybe God was throwing that one away. I don't know. But there's definitely, you know, things to learn about songwriting and all that. But at the same time, the inspiration needs to be from the Spirit. And as we can get those messages from God and then just, you know, put them to music, you know, to any kind of creative form, if we can learn to say them, you know, then God will use them, because He says that His word doesn't come back void. You know, it always goes out and accomplishes what He meant it to accomplish.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant. And also, I was listening to last night and night before last, "Let God Be Praised." That's amazing.
Oh, the song on my, I think it's on my Singing My Heart Out, "Let God Be Praised"?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't write that one. A good friend of mine did.
Okay.
But and that's why I recorded it. I just loved it. I thought, this is so simple, but it is also true. You know, just, just great lyrics in that song.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. I like the end of it. "Oh, Spirit, lead us all our days, and in the end, let God be praised." That was yeah, and just getting, just sort of listening to more of your stuff, and it's
there's something very special about coming together and praising the Lord. You know, I remember I would take people to church, especially in the early days of the Jesus movement, and some of my friends, and even before the pastor would get up to give a teaching, it was just during the worship, people were kind of getting saved. Like, wow, I feel something, like there is the presence of God here. This isn't like going to a concert.
Yeah.
Worship is totally different. And they would just sense, and God's Spirit would be communicating with their spirit, and they would almost be saved before the preacher ever started preaching, you know. So that's wonderful. I think worship can do that.
Yes, it is, isn't it? So yeah, going back to the Jesus movement. So that you say this was kind of like, because it's interesting you're saying that, because I was thinking yesterday about sort of like the hippie movement finished sort of in was it Woodstock in 1979, and so it was kind of, the Jesus movement was, as you say, hippies sort of coming to find this different new love, free love.
Yeah.
So how did that kind of happen? So maybe I'm not getting a clear grasp of the actual. So was the Jesus movement the Calvary Church, or was it sort of broader? Was it just a kind of movement at the time where lots of people were getting saved?
There was some key people that God raised up for the time, and He's always done that. Whether it's raising up Moses or Abraham or or David at the right time. There was people that John the Baptist. He would raise up different people, and there were some key people. Excuse me, in the Jesus movement times. There was a young hippie guy that was named Lonnie Frisbee, and he looked like John the Baptist, and he would go out on the beaches, and he looked like a hippie for sure, which was kind of like Jesus or John the Baptist. And but he would just preach, and he was baptizing people out there. And I remember Chuck Smith's teenage kids kind of started meeting this guy out on the California beaches, and so they brought this guy Lonnie to meet Chuck. And when they, that combination of a good Bible teacher like Chuck Smith and a evangelist like Lonnie Frisbee, that's, for Calvary Chapel anyway, that's where it started there. And then it just grew from there. It seemed like it was true revival. It was God's anointing on several other guys. I remember a young kid named Greg Laurie, was hanging out with us at the time. He's become a famous evangelist and pastor now, and there were many others at the time. The group Love Song got raised up during that time, and they were just a bunch of guys that were looking for truth.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's one thing that was characteristic of that time. I mean, even the Beatles, they were looking for truth, and they thought they found it in, and their gurus, and in India and different things like that. But a lot of that generation was truly looking for, how do we live? What is truth? And so many of them found it in Jesus. And I tell you, it was a move of God, because I would meet people then as I traveled as a missionary in, all over Europe and in Australia and in other places in the world, and you would hear other stories where God's Spirit was just being poured out at that time.
Oh.
And of course, we were praying for another move of God like that.
Yeah.
Probably look a little different as each revival does. But boy, this world sure needs it right now. But that's what happened. A lot of it was centered around Calvary Chapel, but there were other key places, Bill Cakey. He was up in Freeville, New York.
Okay.
That's the other side of the country.
Wow.
But there were things happening there. Now Nancy Honeytree, was in was in Indiana, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it's like God's Spirit was just moving, and it was wonderful.
Wow, I bet. Yeah. Uh-huh. Now, I vaguely remember Chuck Smith. When I was a little girl, my mum and dad, so my dad's a retired a church minister, and we would go to the Keswick Convention. Is it the north of England? I don't know my geography, Karen. You probably know your geography of England better than I do, and I've been here all my life. But it was like a convention, a big tent, and stalls out in the road. And I think Chuck Smith was one of the main speakers at that. We would have been talking about sort of 1979, 78, something like that. But I remember Chuck Smith very much, and he was quite humorous, wasn't he? Was he quite funny?
He could be, but, he was a very serious Bible teacher, but he's very casual. When he saw, one thing I loved about Chuck is his story, his own story, it was he and his wife would go down to Newport Beach, and they would just sit there in their car and just pray for the young people. And his wife, Kay, was such a prayer intercessor, and I would say they were such a good team, because Chuck, on the one hand, he didn't have at first he didn't have as much of a kind of broken heart over everything that was happening with the young people, but his wife Kay did.
Okay.
And so Chuck kind of grew into that. But his style was he would, even on Sunday mornings, he would wear a suit, and they would still use piano and organ and sing the hymns.
Yeah.
And all the hippies were there to do that with him. But then every other night of the week, we would start using the guitars, and that was a big deal. And using guitars, and especially drums and things like that in church. But Chuck would just wear a sports shirt, sit on a stool, and just be very casual.
Oh.
And one thing unusual about Calvary Chapel was it was so packed out, people had to sit on the floor. But the first ones that got there they were able to go and sit on the floor right around Chuck. Just on the rug on the floor, and everybody else had to sit in the pews. So sometimes it's the overflow that has to sit on the floor, but in this case, everybody wanted to be up close and just be there.
Yeah.
So it was quite a scene. It was really wonderful.
Oh, I bet it sounds like really happy days. Happy days is good. And then in was it 1981? You founded Musicians for Missions.
Yeah,
Musicians for Missions,
I called it, yeah. Well, what happened is, because of Sticky First primarily, it went so quickly around the world. I think it was Youth of the Mission and the Catholics that really took it all over the place. And, of course, that first praise album we did started being distributed internationally. And I started getting invitations to go, especially to Europe at first. Went to Australia, New Zealand, mostly Western countries, right then. And so as I came over, and I was a solo artist, so I was able to do concerts on my own. Didn't have to have a band. I always loved bands, but I could do things on my own. So I would do tours of Europe, and as I did my very first extensive tour, like I remember going to a place in Austria, Steyr, Austria, I remember, and I thought, and in those days, not as many young people even spoke English yet.
Okay.
And so I had to be translated. I learned how to do that. I learned how to sing Sticky First in German, and I had my songs translated, because lyrics were always really important to me. The message was there, and so I so wanted, people to understand my lyrics. So I had them translated. We'd put them up on an overhead or in a program, and so that people understood while I was singing about. And I remember thinking, I was so insecure, I thought, this got to be so boring for these people, just listening to this concert in another language. But yet, I remember in Steyr, they put me in this beautiful concert hall, kind of opera house place, and there were so many people there. I thought, people don't know me from a bar of soap. Why are they coming to hear me? It was the phenomena of, this is contemporary Christian music.
Yeah.
And people had not, I was the first time in many places that they had heard something besides their hymns and, organ and piano and things like that. So they came out to hear, and even though I would feel kind of insecure, in those days we wrote letters. And I remember after I went home, this guy from Steyr, he said, I'm so glad that you had your songs translated. We're still passing around your album, and at our Bible studies, we're talking about your lyrics, and people are coming to the Lord just reading your lyrics. And I thought, this is amazing.
Yeah,
wow, little old me, that how God is using this. So I thought, we can't just stay in America. We've got to be going to the world with this, because the world is ready.
Yes.
Young people are ready to hear this. So this vision started forming in me. And one thing I had learned is that, the church sends out missionaries, and they support missionaries financially. And I thought, we can't just go and, ask for a fee or something like that. We've got to just go and offer our music, but we've got to have the funds behind it. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I got to be a missionary.
Yeah.
And very honestly, I went back home and I kind of talked to Maranatha Music. I talked to a few other friends of mine that all thought it was a great idea to do something more regularly and overseas, but they didn't really have the vision with me to do it until I bumped into a guy in Orange, California, where I lived, and he was speaking at his father's church, and I was at the thing that night. His name was Floyd McClung, and his father, Floyd Sr., had this church there, and Floyd was speaking about his being part of Youth at the Mission, and Amsterdam, that's where he was based, or it was Holland at the time. He wasn't in Amsterdam yet. But anyway, I said, hey, I'm going over there for a tour next month. And he said, oh, well, come visit us. And so when I did that, I started sharing with Floyd about this vision I had for putting music into missions.
Yeah.
And I said, I think I have a name for it. Let's just call it Musicians for Missions.
Great.
Because in a sense, the story I told earlier, when I went from professional entertainment, which was pretty good money, to being a music minister, I just took a real deep cut in salary. And, I mean, eventually it built up, and I got some albums out, and all of that helped support me.
Yeah.
But, I wasn't being supported by the church. But when I went into, I did join Youth at the Mission, and what Floyd said, he said, he really prayed about it, and he came back to me, he said, I really think this vision you have for putting music in missions is really of the Lord, and I just want to say, if we can help you do it anyway, just let us know. Okay. And that's all I needed.
Yeah, yeah.
I needed to join up with people that were true missionaries, and I just found, Youth at the Mission became my tribe,
Yes.
I just thought, this has been my home for 40 years now. And even though I'm very big on local church, I'm very involved with the local church, Youth at the Mission had that vision to get, to be very creative, to use the arts, whether it was dance or drama or music, to use the arts out there and to go out on the streets, meet the people, to support the local church. And so I found that Youth at the Mission was the right place for me. So they helped me launch then Musicians for Missions. And so we did that for about 15 years in Amsterdam, and we had short-term things where people could come in, musicians could come in, and we'd form bands that we'd tour all over Europe and be on the streets, and it was just a glorious time. And now it's more of a network of musicians that I'm involved with, but that's how it all got started.
Wow. Oh, that's brilliant. Isn't it amazing? From one seed grows a massive tree. Isn't it? It's life sort of...
Yeah.
Life's interesting.
All it takes is a little seed, and again, we keep saying, God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like I said, I tried my own ways of doing it. First, I went to Maranatha Music, and I said, hey, can we get something going over there? And I went to some other ministers, and they all said, well, this is a real great idea, but, we're real busy with our ministry right here, and nobody had a vision to start it. And Floyd was the one. He was such a releaser of ministries, and in fact, he said, well, God gave you the vision. Maybe you're supposed to lead this. I said, what? Me? I'm a musician. I'm a woman. And I was so insecure to do that.
Okay.
But I have found as a woman, I think this is an important point, that I have found, even as a single woman, and maybe especially as a single woman, when I have strong men, spiritual leaders, behind me and releasing me, I just feel so much more confident to go forward. I'm in a position like that right now in my own home church. It's just a Baptist church here in Santa Fe, and they put me in charge of missions, but the pastor there is so releasing.
Oh.
He sees my heart and my visions, and he just says, yeah, go for it. We'll support you in this. And And I love that when men will not kind of, in a sense, lord over, you know, but they'll recognize that women can have teaching gifts, they can have different kinds of leadership gifts, and they release us. And I am most comfortable when I'm in that position. I have strong male leadership above me, but they recognize that I do have some giftings that I can do myself.
That's brilliant. That is very good, isn't it? Because, you know, for so long, I think women have been, you know, a woman's role in the church. The stricter the church is, or more conventional the church is, it can sort of be, the woman's place is, go back to what the...
Well, they always loved women to serve, you know, with food and everything else, and of course we can. I mean, I'm all about hospitality. I have a big house here, and I'm hosting people all the time.
That's lovely.
My mom taught me that. I love that. But there are some brilliant women that are very anointed women that are good teachers.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, just really, and I think maybe the first but not the only ministry that they will have will be to other women. And I love strong women's ministries because, you know, we emotional women, maybe we need more prayer or whatever. We just need people to talk to.
Yes, and, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's good. But there's a lot of, we had a brilliant woman from New Zealand named Joy Dawson, who's been one of our main teachers in Youth at the Mission. And I remember there was one denomination that in a sense they weren't supposed to have, you know, women teachers exactly. But I knew several pastors that were in secret listening to Joy Dawson's tapes, you know, because she was such a brilliant teacher on prayer and on the fear of the Lord. And, so they wanted to learn God's truth. And she was just very anointed in that area. So anyway, and yet Joy is one that she always respected her place in the total ministry. She never, you know, tried to take over a lot of stuff. She always submitted to her husband and all of that. You know, real good example for us all.
Yeah, it's getting a balance, isn't it? And also, you know, times change and things move in different directions, and it's just getting. And also, I was wondering, Karen, about. I mean, I can remember. Sort of there was a TV program over here called The Rock Gospel Show, and a lot of Christians were sort of, oh my goodness, they're playing electric guitars, you know. It was like,
oh well, there was a time for that. I think we're over that now. Yeah.
But was there a lot of sort of response?
You know, I found some tricks. I was raised in a church. I was raised in a Baptist church, so it's pretty conservative, so I understood the church pretty well. I write about this in my book. I found that, for example, here's I don't think this story got in the book, but I'm actually going to on my website write kind of the rest of the story, some of the things like this. But I was in a little invited to come for a youth night on a Sunday night in a little church in a town called Hemet, California, and so they said, hey, this is our youth night, so, you know, really be ready for that. So I brought a band, and we were going to, like, start off with a bang and everything and go for it. And we were praying backstage, and I kind of looked to see who was out there. And here was all these grandmas on the front row, and then a few kind of mid-aged people, you know, families and stuff. And then there were extra youth, but they were mostly sitting in the back. And this was supposed to be youth night. I thought, well, you know what? Some of these grandmas that come to Sunday night church for the last 50 years, they're not going to not come. Exactly. I thought they probably should have had this youth night on a Saturday night, but here we are. And I thought, you know, if we get out there and start with our big, you know, bang thing, you know, it's going to, probably the kids will be elbowing each other and say, hey, wonder what your granny thinks of this, you know. And I thought it was so much disrespect for those old saints that were sitting on the front row. So I said, okay, guys, I know we haven't practiced this, but just follow me. They're easy chords. We're just going to do some hymns. So I went out there and I said, well, this is youth night. It looks like there's youth of all ages here tonight.
Oh.
So I'm going to try to do some music for everybody.
Great.
So I started off with kind of a country gospel thing with just some old hymns that we did kind of in a fun bluegrass kind of style. And, the Vannies, they could all do that. And then the second song I did was a song I wrote about my grandmother.
Oh, lovely.
It's called Grandma Stout, on my very first album. And, I said, I bet some of you are grandmothers here and that you probably really pray for your kids, and for your grandkids and all that. So here's a song that I wrote about my grandmother. So the whole point of it was I was just trying to warm up and be friends with the older generation first.
That's
and
brilliant.
once you get their trust, then you can do almost everything.
Yeah.
But it's like, you have one chance to make a first impression.
Sure.
So I thought I couldn't do the youth things on my first song. So I said, now I'm going to give some of you a chance. I'm going to do some songs for those young people back there. And how many of you grannies here know that you don't listen to the same kind of music as your grandkids do, And so now I'm going to give you a chance if you want to go ahead in the fellowship hall and wait for us there, you can, because we're going to do some youth music now. And but you know what? Nobody left.
Wow.
I gave them that chance, but why it worked is because I made friends with them.
Yes.
So now I was sort of one of, their kids, and so I went ahead and did the other thing. We did kind of make sure that the volume wasn't too loud.
Yeah.
Because the volume itself could be offensive to people. So anyway, it worked, and I just find, I've had other times I've been challenged of wearing, wearing trousers.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not now, but in the early days.
Yeah.
So we often had to wear dresses because they didn't understand.
Oh,
and
of course.
Even just a couple of years ago, I was wearing a very long dress that, well, it was a long culotte kind of thing. They did have a split in the leg, but if I put my legs together, it looked like a long dress.
Yeah.
But actually, they were kind of, trousers more because they had a split in the middle.
Yeah.
And I was actually not able to sing at one church because I was wearing trousers.
No, really?
This is in Africa. But anyway, so I would really try to be careful because I thought I don't care how I dress. To me, it's those scriptures that talk about for the sake of love. We may have freedom to do certain things, but we don't do them so that we won't offend people. And I'm a strong believer in that. So, I don't care what I wear,
Yeah.
I'm not identified with my dress, but, a lot of young people today are. But on the flip side of that is the older folks needed to accept people no matter what they look like.
That's it, isn't it?
No matter how they were dressing, how many piercings or tattoos they have, we still need to love them.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That's really nice. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Loving irrespective of what one's wearing.
Yeah,
so,
it really is.
Very exciting. So, Seek Ye First, the Karen Lafferty story, is about to be released. A book.
Yeah.
Autobiography.
Years ago, actually, Kingsway Music in England, Kingsway Publishing asked me to do a biography years ago, and I kind of got it started a little bit, and I just never could get it together, and so we all dropped it. But, I'm glad I waited so long because God wasn't finished healing me yet, and I needed to write about my personal, emotional healing. And so to me, that's the takeaway of the book. I have a lot of adventures, of all kinds of things that I've done through the years. But to me, everybody's got an interesting story. I'm sure if I was interviewing you, we could find a lot of interesting things in your life.
No, my autobiography would consist of 5 pages, Karen.
But, the point is God's story. So what does God do in a life that is submitted to Him? And for me, it took a few years to get really emotionally healed from certain hurts that I had from younger in life.
Yeah.
And but God really has accomplished that. So that's what I want people to hear. Stories of reconciliation between, like, my father died when I was 12. My mom remarried 2 years later, and I hated that man that she married. I just didn't like him. He was unreasonable. You know, and yet at the end of his life, you know, he and I were close, and he was in my house. My mother passed away, and he passed away in my home. And there's all kinds of things where reconciliation, forgiveness, personal healing, that's what people really need to hear about, I think.
Yeah.
So, it is coming out, and it will be available on starting about April, mid-April sometime. We don't have an exact date, but mid-April, that's just about a month away now. It will be available on Amazon for download, and, of course, to order, they print on demand, you could get it. I will have it at my personal website, too, which is KarenLafferty.com. So anyway, it's just called Seek Ye First, the Karen Lafferty Story, and that will be coming out then about mid-April.
Oh, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to purchasing my copy. That's that's
well, good. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's and on the one hand, I wasn't real excited about kind of hanging out all my dirty laundry. You know, I mean, as I was struggling through healing, you know, I feel like, gosh, I'm really ashamed of some of the ways I lived during that time. But you know what? I'm a dirty, rotten sinner saved by grace.
It's all part.
So I'm just glad for God's grace and for God sticking in there with us, and He does that to anybody, for anybody.
And life is all about different chapters and learning different things along the way. And we sometimes do things that, you know, my sister once saying to me, because I've been in a couple of relationships that have been emotionally abusive, and
absolutely, yeah.
I remember my sister saying to me, but don't beat yourself up, because no one goes into something knowing it's a mistake, otherwise you wouldn't do it. And I thought, that makes perfect sense.
That's true.
But I think life is sort of, you know, we have to do certain things, and things that we, you know, are good for us, things that haven't been good for us, and cause it takes us to where we are now.
That's really true. You know, and one thing also I just want to kind of put a little emphasis on here is, in this world we live in, it is so global. We have so many, and there's so much, I don't know how it is in England, but in America, it just seems like every day you'll hear, you know, it seems like race. I don't think we're really a racist nation. I think we have really come a long way, and yet politically, that's what you hear every day.
Yeah.
And I just think, so how do we combat this as Christians? Well, for example, years ago, we were going down to South Africa, and we were fighting apartheid. You know, apartheid was where they had certain races live in certain areas. And there were some Christian artists that wouldn't go, and I think that the entertainers from America and other places wouldn't go to a place called Sun City, which was like their Las Vegas or big entertainment place. And because their statement was boycotting that, but I don't think certain Christian artists not going, they weren't going to miss them. But they wouldn't go because they were trying to boycott. I thought, that's not how we live.
No.
So we've got to go down there and just live like Christians should live.
Yeah.
So we had Christian artist seminars where we invited every race. We invited coloreds, and we invited Zulus, and, you know, choirs, and Afrikaners, and, you know, international ones. And the things that brought us together was Jesus and our faith and music.
Great.
And there was such great, in fact, I write about that in my book, because great things happen. So what I wanted to emphasize is that the way we fight racism is we just go out and be Christian. I mean, we know that every tribe and nation is going to be in the kingdom of heaven, and, you know, they're not all going to look the same way. They're probably going to do different kinds of music, and you know, that's good. And it is, my life has been so enriched by having very good friends that are of other nations and colors and races.
Yes.
And we stay in each other's homes. We are truly good friends.
Yeah.
And I've just been enriched because of those relationships.
That's it, isn't it?
So I just want to encourage people to live like that. Don't feel like I don't know, maybe if God leads you to demonstrate, okay. But I think it's a better demonstration just to live it.
Yes, it is, isn't it? And it's a shame because racism is something that's taught, isn't it? Children just play with whoever, white child,
it's very
black
plain
child.
in the scriptures, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
So we need to follow what God tells us. Seek first God's kingdom, and His kingdom is all different colors.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, Karen, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much for sharing of your life and being such a blessing with the work you do. And
well, thank you. I feel honored that you asked me to do this. I'm always glad to tell my story, and because it's God's story.
Oh, yes, absolutely, isn't it? And,
yeah.
Looking forward to the book. Is it okay to have the link to when the book's published and also the link to the website? Is that okay?
They'll find it on Amazon, but like I said, they go to KarenLafferty.com.
Okay.
They'll find it by mid-April. It'll be there, and but the downloaded versions will be on Amazon.
Okay.
And other places too. I mean, I don't know if you have Walmart and things like Barnes and Noble, but it's at other sites too. But anyway, it'll be downloadable and print on demand and things like that at those places.
Wonderful. Oh, that's brilliant. Very much looking forward to that. Oh, God bless you richly, Karen. And thanks again for all you do. And thank you so much for being a guest on my show. And to the audience.
Well, you're welcome. It's, like I said, it's a privilege to be here. Wish we could have done it face to face, but it's miracles of technology. It's wonderful we can do it like this.
It is. One day, when I'm brave enough to travel to the States, because I'm petrified of flying.
Well, I've got a nice Airbnb here, and Santa Fe is a wonderful place. It's one of the oldest cities in North America.
Ooh.
Oldest European cities, I always say, because we got thousands-year-old, Native American cities. But it's a beautiful place, and you ever get to America, you should stop by here.
Oh, lovely! I'd love to. I would. I do have my fear of flying. If I overcome my fear of flying, I'll pay you a visit.
Yeah. Okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks again, Karen. And thank you to the audience at home for listening. And until next time, lots of love and God bless. Just as a footnote to this interview with Karen, I wanted to elaborate on why Seek Ye First was somewhat of a comfort blanket to me. I think I may have mentioned in a previous broadcast about an unpleasant experience I had in a Christian home when I was, at a guess, roughly 6 or 7 years old. At the hands of a practicing occultist who was living next door to the family home of where my parents used to visit. On this particular occasion, when I would usually go upstairs with the son to play with action men and toy guns and cars and things like that, feminine little girl that I was, there was what I would describe as a figure of light in the dark doorway of his sister's bedroom, which almost became the elephant in the room from that point on, because this friend and I, we lost contact sort of when we were in our teens, late teens, and it was certainly something that was never brought up. We never raised it again. I think on my part, probably because I felt that he had to stay in that house, he had to live there, and I didn't really want to remind him of this. I could escape, I could leave, I was now away from whatever it was, but there was clearly something hanging around in that house which wasn't pleasant. So certainly, I can only speak for myself, certainly it left me petrified well into adulthood of the supernatural. Anyway, this was around 1979, and A Scottish recording artist at this time by the name of Sheila Walsh had recorded an album called Future Eyes. The opening track was titled Here With Me. The sister was in her teens at this point, and she had this album. And during the future visits to this family, my little friend would leave this track running whenever he left the room, because it was of comfort to me in the event that this thing, whatever this thing was, should be seen again. Also at this time, in the Mission Praise hymn book, was this much sung, much loved modern day classic called Seek Ye First. I fell in love with this song and considered the writer to be somewhat of a genius. When you love a song so much, you're familiar with the name of the writer. So from ever since I can remember, the name Karen Lafferty had been familiar to me. This was my kind of everything is going to be all right hymn. Anyway, after Karen and I spoke, I was talking with a friend, and I said how it's a very strange feeling speaking with someone whose creativity has been of such impact to you for over 4 decades. It goes to show how old I am. But they've been completely unaware of that, and they haven't known you from Adam. If you think about it, most of the people in our lives that have been of significant blessing have been those we've known on a personal level. But for a stranger to have huge impact, it's a very fascinating consideration. So here's a big thank you to Karen for her awesome work, from myself and no doubt numerous other friends unknown.